Yeah.
Ready.
Cool. All right. Welcome to the TWIJ Show. I'm Chris Wink, your host and CEO of Technically, a news site about local economies and change. Each week, the TWIJ Show dives into topics on building better companies with leaders who are doing just that. We are an extension of Technically's This Week in Jobs newsletter, which you can join at Technically Subscribe. Today, we are talking about how to hire for technical roles remotely. We will get into some universal topics like conveying company culture that will be helpful for any remote hiring, but we're also going to talk specifically about doing this for technical roles. To do that, I have two guests. I have Amanda Elefante. She's the Vice President for People for HealthVerity, based in Center City, Philadelphia. They are a venture-backed healthcare technology company. They have about 90 employees and last year raised a $25 million Series C. She previously held internal recruiting roles for email marketing company AWeber and social network company The Meet Group. I also have my old friend, Mawulom Nenonene. He's the head of talent for LTSE, a nearly 40-person fintech startup based in San Francisco. Previously, he worked on talent acquisition roles for Silicon Valley companies like BetterUp, Nava, and Thumbtack. Mo, Amanda, thanks for being here. Where are you, and will you be remote for the rest of your lives?
So where am I? Currently, I'm in Maryland. Will I be remote for the rest of my life? I'm not quite sure, actually. I've worked remotely for the past 3 years, but I do enjoy traveling and actually being in the space with certain people. So I hope not.
Hey there. Thanks again for having me, Chris. I'm broadcasting from New Hope, Pennsylvania, right outside of New Jersey, actually. We're right on the border there. But typically I'm in the office almost every day in Center City, Philadelphia. And I think there will be a new normal, but I don't know what it's going to be yet. So we will have to see. I think it's difficult in the people role to be remote permanently. So I highly doubt that I will be remote for the rest of my life.
So, it's the same question. So let's dive right into this conversation. I want to get into some real specifics, but let's start with a couple philosophical beliefs. Can we hire people remotely as well as we can hire them if we saw them in person?
Straight answer?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to give you no more context. That's the question. Can this be done? Mo, you've been in lots of remote roles. You've been hiring remotely for years. Amanda, you represent a company culture that has been somewhat office bound. I don't think there's not a right answer. Do you think can this be done as well remotely, virtually, as it can be done if you were side by side with the people you're interviewing?
I do, wholeheartedly. But it requires a few things. One of them is just a structured process, having a clear understanding of the signals you're looking for, having the rigor that goes into structured interviews, and then essentially building out a system where your team can actually connect with folks and onboard in a way that's conducive to building a bond. And there are a few organizations that have been remote since their initial origin. BetterUp, an organization I worked for in the past, was a remote first company. If you take a look at Git, they've been remote since the beginning. So I do think it's possible, but I think it has to be done with incredible intentionality.
Amanda.
Yeah.
Counterpoint.
So I would say pre-COVID, I was not a believer. And in fact, had a conversation just this past January with our co-founders and one of our board members around our hiring process. And I was point blank asked at that time, why don't you just hire remotely? And I just didn't think it produced the same result as having a piece of the process include an in-person portion. Now we don't have an option, right? And so, as a team, we've already hired, I think, about 12 people remotely. And, it is the new normal right now for us, and we have to figure out if it can work. Yeah, I think it's too soon to say for sure if we're going to net the same quality candidates, but so far it seems to be working. I'm amazed that there's candidates willing to join a company that they've never been in the office to see, and they've never met people in person, and yet they're still willing to take the plunge. And I think that's commendable and remarkable. And it's new for me. So I'm learning, and I think, so far the candidates we brought on have been amazing. So To Mo's point, I think absolutely this is possible.
In a few interviews I've done, it's been reminded to me that just like anything, if we believe that company cultures are somewhat distinct, of course, remote hiring would be done somewhat differently depending on the company. It might just be, is it in the DNA of the organization? And for those watching, it might be different for different companies depending on what type of work you do, technical, even what types of technical roles you're doing. But that's a helpful start. So why don't we get into like what is different for someone who has been doing remote hiring for years, for someone who is somewhat new to it. You both have like different perspectives. Let's start with what is exactly the same. What is exactly the same about hiring if you met them in person every single step of the way, and if you only ever saw them virtually? What are the truisms of hiring that are never different? You would never change no matter what type of hiring you're doing.
I think Mawulom said it, where you have to have a structured process, right? And you follow that process. And I think that is the same in person as well as virtually. You tweak certain things about it to get the same result, or, to achieve the result. But having that structure is critical in both in person as well as virtual hiring.
Yeah. And to echo that, looking for the skill sets and attributes, I think it's the core goal. Overall, when we break down roles, and for the past organizations that I've been in, it's looking at the overall goal of the role, the deliverable, and the skill sets distilled that are required to actually get there, and then looking specifically for those. So I will echo that the core signals that companies are looking for will remain the same. How they look for those signals, however, I think it's something that I hope you ask next.
Wow. Yeah. So then, all right, then lead us in there. What the heck is different? What is different once you go virtual? No, guys.
So,
yeah.
I'll give you a specific case. So for a structured technical interview, let's leverage a software engineering interview. In past organizations, we've built specific processes to allow individuals to actually do coding assessments in person, while others have a take-home, and while others have a live collaborative coding session. This is to actually mimic how we really work, rather than giving you a test that's completely in left field. You have that option, and different people opt for different things because they perform better under different circumstances. So now, given that we are fully remote, that coming in person is not an option. So there are systems that you can leverage, like Code Signals, to actually do a pair coding and create a real-time environment. But the nuances of coming into the office, meeting someone, and for an engineer that actually would like that interaction and sit across from someone or next to someone while they're coding, those nuances are being changed.
Yeah, Amanda, you're actually a great example here too, because you were doing fully, in-person interviews for the final steps. That's now radically changed in the last 8 weeks. Are there things you're seeing that are just totally different?
I think what's different is being able to measure the signals, right? So, what is different? It's a flat experience, like literally and interpersonally. There's a lag in the communication. You have to plan for that, and you have to balance that exchange. When we're in person, we're used to assessing that candidate through communication that is mostly physical, body language, tone of voice. We're not able to really get all of that now over the video. And so it takes a lot more energy, and at the same time, there's a hyper focus on just facial features, right? So you see that eye roll, and it means a lot more because you're not being able to balance that with the tone and with the body language. You're really only seeing from here up, right? And so it's a lot more difficult. It takes a little longer because you want to be sure, right? You don't want to have that bias drive the decision. And so you're looking for the data and the facts and the process. But, for a software engineer example, our typical process previously would be a phone screen with our people ops team, a written assessment that people would do from home. If that went well, we would go to a video interview with 2 engineers and the candidate. And it was a collaborative kind of, pair programming type of experience, not a gotcha interview. And then if that went well, we would invite them on site. And when they came on site, they would have a soft skills interview with 2 people, and then they'd have 2 different technical assessments in which they would also be coding, but in person and in a collaborative way. And so we're following that same structure, but now we have to do that in person over the video. And I think on one hand, it's great because you are sharing that screen while they're coding and you're able to follow it, whereas in person, it's a little more difficult to follow that screen. So I think, you know, you're hyper-focused more so on the video aspects of it, but it's more difficult to figure out that fit, that cultural fit, and whether or not this is a collaborative person, someone who wants to work with a team, because it's still important we assess that. Right now, we think we are going to go back into an office at some point, and we want to be able to hire people who are looking for that environment. So it does take a little bit more effort to evaluate that.
I want to actually, I'm going to ask you both to walk me through a case study, some actual hiring you've done recently, and like I want to get in the nuts and bolts of how it happened. So maybe have that in your mind, because I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Well, before I do, an important thing for us at Technically that I think a lot about is how you convey company values and culture. Similar, you know, Mo, you've been describing this sort of thing for folks for years for companies. Amanda, you've had to somewhat update how you do that process. I wonder if you guys could both talk a sec about that far less concrete outcome of an interview process in which you were trying to match people. Doesn't matter how skilled they are, doesn't matter how great a company it is. You just want to see if there's a match between what we think we stand for, how we get things done. How is that coming through in the virtual experience in a way that maybe in an office experience, it happens at the, you know, when you go to get the water for the office and that candidate bumps into someone, it's very not quite planned. How do you do that in a much more sterile environment of virtual? Are you guys thinking about that at all?
Wholeheartedly. And you said a key word there, sterile. So virtual, it's actually the opposite for us. And by that, I mean, I mentioned this to you before in our last conversation, and it's still the same. Our children are in the back, my dog's in the back. They can come in at any time, and it's completely okay. So the virtual environment allows you to view the inner workings of a life that you typically would not get, because most of us are working remotely, most of us are sheltering in. So that allows individuals an opportunity to actually be human. So starting an interview by just letting folks know your disposition, what's going on in your world, and that gives them the signal that they can do the same. As it pertains to culture and principles, those are fairly difficult things to convey. So every touch point matters. Making sure that throughout the interview process, the way we greet individuals, providing structure for the interviews, what to expect, signing off, allowing them time to actually ask questions, getting back to them, and ensuring that they're aware of what's going on throughout the entire process is critical. In terms of, in addition to that, what we've done that I think it's value added, and this is specific to this organization, is create paired interviews. So typically we have an initial chat, a hiring manager screen, and then we have a technical screen or skill set screen, depending on the role that you're going for. And then we have paired virtual on-site interviews. And those virtual interviews are paired for a reason, so that we can get 2 different individuals with different dispositions in a position to connect with you, giving you an opportunity to connect with different people in different ways. And that further highlights who we are, which ideally would resonate with one part of you or many parts of you, so that you would know that coming into this environment, there are people that have your similar interests or potentially similar dispositions.
Yeah, Amanda.
I think there's a lot we're doing, you know, to try to convey the culture. So one of the things we're doing initially is just spending more time warming up the candidate in that you know, link, right? So it's one dedicated link for the interview process. And so we'll have our people team come in the beginning and just have a very casual conversation, let them know what's going on, to Mawulom's point, like in their lives, and convey that just kind of low-key, authentic experience. And once we feel that they're ready, then we move forward in the process. We've also been able to introduce some breaks in between. Sometimes it's the calendar, but also sometimes it's just a better experience for the candidate too. So maybe we can do 2 hours in the morning and then another 2 hours in the afternoon. It doesn't have to be a solid block of time now because people are remote. And so that has given us a little more flexibility. And candidates have said it's less stressful actually for them to be interviewing remotely than to have to come in person. So that's nice too. I feel like we're getting a more, accurate read on someone because they're less stressed in the experience. Additionally, we're taking them on a tour of the office, but virtually, right? So we've put together some photos of, hey, now we're in the kitchen and this is where we make the coffee, right? Hey, this is overlooking Market Street and this is your view from the engineering space. And so it's similar to what we would do in person, but we're doing it through photos because again, these are people who haven't been in our office, who haven't met with us personally, and we're just trying to get them as comfortable as possible with our culture and who we are. But also it is every touch point. It is letting them know, hey, here's my cell phone. If someone doesn't come on to the screen when they're supposed to, or if you have a technical issue, just call me, just text me. I'm going to jump in. And then also for our team, we've created a special Slack channel called #interview. And so if someone's finished their turn, but the other person hasn't come in, they can alert everyone to say, hey, look, I'm done. So that we're not leaving people hanging and questioned whether or not what's going on. But every single exchange means 10 times more, I think, over the video. Everything's being assessed much more critically by the candidate as well as by our team. So it's important to slow down the speech and be welcoming and smile. You know, a lot of times our team members are really into the interview, and I always remind them, don't forget to intro yourself. Don't forget to smile. They're trying to decide whether or not this is what they want too. And you know, don't miss the opportunity to share who you are with each candidate. So
it was good.
Yeah.
No, I love that part in particular. I think all of us can forget, as much as we want to be ruthlessly efficient professionals, at the end of the day, we just spend a chunk of our time with people we either like or don't, doing solving problems we either find interesting or don't. I think I come a lot back to that of you can all the avocados you want. At the end of the day, do I like these people, and is the problem interesting? That's really what a lot of us are really going to make a lot of our decisions on. So with that in mind, I want to put a chunk of time here and with each of you go through a like nuts and bolts case study. Truly, I don't think any detail is too detailed. That's the journalist in me. But like, Mawulom, maybe like, is there a recent hiring process, even if it was somewhat mundane or normal? So I think you can say normal or unusual, whichever seems like there are more lessons. Can you walk us through, this was the role we put up, this is the journey that person went through, this is the interview process we did. Give me the full view, screening and the like, and how it went in a virtual environment.
Perfect. So full view. Let's talk through the front-end architect role. So the front-end architect role is a role that is very important to our overall services team. And putting up the role means actually creating a job description in Lever, putting that role up and allowing it to be placed in various places. So I'll talk about what happens before that. You mentioned no detail is too small, so feel free to stop me when you're ready. So before the role goes up, typically we have conversations about the goals, the deliverables, build the role template, which essentially includes the overall skill sets we're looking for, the interview plan, who's going to review the pipeline, who's actually going to interview the person, what signals are they looking for, if there's a take home, what does that look like? So building that entire process out and then leveraging Slack to create a specific group for that hiring team so that we can align on hiring needs. And once that's launched, part of launching it is actually creating this role in our ATS. Outside of creating the job descriptions, actually creating the entire interview plan, creating the specific feedback forms that are required, and then launching the role. Once the role is launched, outside of having a human being review and having a hiring manager review as well as a recruiting professional, top of funnel, we're running various experiments. One of those experiments is working with the new newcraft.io team to review top of funnel candidates in a short amount of time. So that allows us to actually address the volume and also be responsive to our pipeline. Once a candidate gets into the pipeline, the tool that we're using is Lever. And I love ATSs. It's a love-and-hate relationship. It's
Yes, it's never been said. I love ATS.
I do. Well, there's something about having a central master file resource where you can point everyone back to. Whether it's a Thumbtack, whether it's a Blackboard, I love having a central repository where we can keep our ideas. So that's my main reason for ATS Love. It's a transparency. So we provide feedback in the ATS specifically on the candidate, and the candidate goes from an initial call to a technical assessment to a hiring manager interview. And let's go back up to the technical assessment. For the front-end architect role, the technical assessment is being done by the Woven teams. And what's great about Woven teams is outside of building our technical assessment and deploying it, they provide a grade and a complete feedback form, but they also provide specific feedback to the interviewer. And I know I've shared this with you before. I am deeply passionate about actually providing feedback to all interviews. It's not always possible due to legal recourse. So whenever it is possible, whenever you can leverage a third party or build a robust enough system where you can provide feedback, I think it's just a really positive and thoughtful thing to do to allow individuals to continue to grow as they're searching for roles. So with Woven teams, they'll share specific feedback with us.
And Mo, just this could be my own ignorance, but Woven teams meaning like different departments represented?
Oh, perfect. Thank you for slowing me down. So Woven teams is actually a technical assessment tool similar to Code Signal that you can leverage to assess a candidate's technical aptitude.
Got it.
And it's what we use.
It's a platform that I did not know that I should have known, is what you're saying.
Not at all. Not at all. This is a lot of these things are new. So it's useful, and specifically for the scoring as well as the feedback to both sides. So from there, we move into the hiring manager interview and then the technical virtual on-site interview. Our on-site interviews are a period of 3 45-minute interviews where, although they're quote unquote virtual on-sites, it's not necessary for them to be on the same day. We at times spread them out throughout the week so that we can have one session a day, and we do our best to align to the overall candidate's disposition. And once we get positive signals there, we move to our last step, which is our founder interview, where the candidate gets one-on-one time with our founder to get to learn more about our organization, future goals, and the founder gets to get more insights into them. And it's a way to really leave the door open. We are a small group, and as we scale, accessibility, relatability, our principles and our culture allows us to actually be close and open to each other. So that's the entire process. We do the offer dance, but I'll stop there.
Oh, I think we might need to hear more about that. But before I ask about the offer dance, what do you think you're best at as an organization right now? What part of that process, or what lessons or tactics do you think everyone listening should say, I'm going to steal that from LTSE?
Oh, okay. Shared ideas are the most crucial things that I think humans can do. So it's always leveraging it to grow. And when I think about the best, what's top of mind is the offer dance. So we leverage hiringplan.io, which is an internal tool to pull compensation data from Convey, and then we build out overall hiring plans. When it comes down to the offer dance, we have a structured process to pull data, and we're very transparent with candidates and give them insights into the level, the expectations of the level, the signals that we received, as well as what the overall expectations are in terms of the compensation strategy. And it allows individuals, in my opinion, to not have to haggle. Think about it, when you get to the end of a job process, skills that you may have learned for 20 years, having to haggle and negotiate without data seems kind of off. So that's one thing that I think we do really well. And I would hope, and I would encourage others to actually take a look at hiringplan.io and create a structured process for compensation that is scalable throughout your organization.
That's great. No, that's perfect. So, Amanda, I wonder if there you could do a version of that for some role you've hired recently, and get us in the muck. Give us the details.
Sure. So I think I probably touched on it a little bit already, but for our technical interviews, we do follow a very similar process. We have that first phone interview with the people team, and on that phone interview, we're looking for the soft skills, but there's an acronym I use called CLOSE on that phone interview, and it's compensation, location, opportunity, skills, and experience. And it's something I've put together, and it's just really, are they in line with 4 out of 5? And usually if more than one is out of line, it's probably, we don't move forward, right? And that's in addition to the soft skills portion of the interview. But we're really looking on that first phone interview for someone who is passionate about what they do. We also characterize candidates on that first phone interview as either a passion candidate or someone who is doing software engineering because they're smart enough to do it and it affords them a specific lifestyle that they enjoy, but it isn't necessarily their passion. And so we will kind of decide through that conversation, is this someone who would be coding no matter how much it paid them, or is this someone who's doing it just because it is a lifestyle for them? And so we're looking for people who, wouldn't do anything else. This is exactly what they want to be doing because we want that energy, we want those ideas, we want that enthusiasm. And that's a lot to cover in 30 minutes, right? So, we do our best. We're not going to hit a 10 out of 10, but we are looking for those things in that first phone interview.
Amanda, do you have a rule of thumb or like of the top of funnel most spoke about? What's the criteria to get that phone interview? Are you guys do you do lots of them, or are you pretty discerning? I don't think there's a good or right answer. Just curious about your view of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in my past roles and when I initially came to HealthVerity, I was doing the resume review to decide who would move forward and who wouldn't. At some point, though, the volume became too much, right? Like we currently have 20 roles open. And so in order for us to be responsive to candidates, because we have to be in order to compete in the environment, we started to bring the hiring managers into the resume review process and have them participate in who moves forward and who doesn't. And again, I see interviewing and hiring as one of the biggest engagement opportunities for the people team, right? It isn't just about filling a position. You're building your culture together, you're building your team together. And to allow the software engineering team to help decide who moves forward and who doesn't is a wonderful way to engage everyone and have ownership in the process. So the resume review, again, is often done by the hiring manager, but it depends on who has the bandwidth. It can also be done by the people team. But that's a great question.
Do you have a rule of thumb of how many phone interviews you're doing for an average open role, or is there a lot of range?
There is a lot of range. I think, again, it depends on the market. Right now, we're one of very few people hiring. So we're being flooded with applicants, and we have to be more discerning. At other points in time, over the 4 years I've been there, it hasn't been that way. And so we end up talking to more people than we probably would, just because, if nothing else, we're helping to promote the name and the brand out in the community. And so, I would say, we talk to a lot of people. We are very generous with that. It's a pretty wide brush that we, review those resumes with. And then on the phone interview itself, I kind of went into some of the details of that first phone interview. Once they do the assessment, that's the next step if it goes well there. What's being assessed on the assessment is their communication, accuracy, clarity, efficiency of their code, and bonus points for passion, right? So there's parts of that assessment, and it's a homegrown assessment. We realize there's a lot of tools out there that we could use, but these are questions that our team has put together with the goal of it taking probably no more than 3 hours for a software engineer to complete. And then those are the categories that our engineers will assess the candidate on once the assessment comes back in. So when it comes back in, our team will schedule it on the calendar of our team, and we look to see about 4 engineers to weigh in before we make a decision on whether or not that candidate will move forward or not. And we like it to be a balance of some junior engineers as well as more senior engineers. And typically there's consensus around the evaluation. So we're scoring that evaluation on proficiency, meaning, your typical ATS has maybe like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and usually like a 1 and 2 doesn't move forward, and maybe like a 3, 4, 5 might move forward. But for our ATS, which is pretty rigid, and we're looking for a new one, so I might reach out to you, Mawulom, and talk about all these ATSs that you enjoy, because we're currently evaluating them. But we score it on proficiency, right? So a junior engineer might score a 1 or 2, but that doesn't mean they won't move forward. It just means that's their level of proficiency. And so we do take that into consideration at the assessment stage, the written assessment. And then if that goes well, they move forward to the video interview. On the video interview, we're assessing their problem-solving skills, the communication. So is there a back and forth while they're problem-solving, similar to what we would expect in the office environment? Or do they just go heads down and don't speak, right? We're looking at their depth of knowledge and also, their independence. Are they looking to be guided through that, or are they taking lead and jumping in and proposing solutions? We use remote interview IO for that portion of it. And what's nice about that tool is it can be recorded. And so for someone who may not have participated in the video interview, if we're at the end of the cycle and we're trying to make a decision, anyone can jump in and see how that person problem solved through the video interview. So that's a nice feature of that platform. Is this too much detail?
No, this is great.
No? Okay. And so the video interview goes well, and that's what we've assessed. Then we move them forward to the on-site. And I mentioned before, there's a couple pieces to that. One with the people team, another, it's usually pairs of people that are interviewing. So the soft screen was usually done by our CTO along with another engineer. And then we'll have 2 other pairs of people who interview, and those are technical assessments. During that portion of the on-site, and I say on-site, but of course it's over video right now.
Right.
We're evaluating them on their focus, their ability to take feedback. So part of that on-site, to Mawulom's point, we want to give them feedback on their written assessment, right? So they know they move forward, but everyone wants to hear, how did I do? Like, did I meet the bar? And if so, in what way? And where did I miss? And so we provide that feedback during the on-site interview as well. And we look to see how that feedback is received. And more problem solving is evaluated, as well as their level of interest, right? So we're demoing our product to the candidates during that on-site. And, we're looking for the signals that this is the type of work and this is the type of product they want to be involved in. And then we go to roundtable, right? So the interview's done and we're doing the roundtable. I would say the roundtable is more challenging now. As a team, making a decision about a candidate is more challenging in a remote environment than it is in person, right? So if you think about it, our team is very disciplined, and they give the feedback into the applicant tracking system prior to talking to anyone else about their thoughts on the candidate, right? We're looking to reduce bias as best we can and to reduce groupthink. We want the independent thoughts of our team as we make these decisions. But once people put that feedback in an environment like, the office, you're having that water cooler. So what'd you think? Oh, I thought he was great here, or she did well here. We don't really have that now, right? So it's all happening in the round table.
Right.
And it's on a platform, Zoom. And again, you're not able to read the body language. You're not able to hear the tone as much. Only one person at a time is speaking. And it is very challenging for the people team, but we have to pay attention to who is not speaking up on that Zoom, because we want everyone's opinion, right? And we want everyone to weigh in on that decision. And then we move to the offer. Now, we start the offer dance on that first phone call, right? We want to have an understanding of where they would like to be compensation-wise. And we let our candidates know that throughout the process, they will be assessed, and we base the offer on the performance of their interviews and their assessments. And they get some feedback about that at the on-site. And so when we get to the offer stage, it's not usually a surprise.
Yep, that's great. It's incredibly helpful. Both of those case studies are really appreciated. We're coming up on time, but there's a couple ticky-tack things I want to do here at the tail end. For one, the thrust of this was meant to be on technical hiring, and you guys both did a really great job of highlighting how you approach that technical hiring. In particular, the concept of assessments comes up a ton. Just wondering, for your non-technical roles, particularly those, I mean, anyone who's essentially not writing code, I suppose, do you have some other version of assessments? Does that stay very close to technical roles? Are there any other methods for assessment you are using for non-technical roles in virtual hiring right now? Is the question I'm trying to ask. How the heck are you assessing people who aren't technical when you hire them virtually?
So the answer is yes. And I talk about technical skills, but the core of the role profile is getting clear on the skill sets that are required for the role. And when it comes to engineering specific positions, some of those skill sets may or most often are code writing related. But when it comes to things like marketing or people operations role, some of those skill sets are not technical in nature in the sense that you're not writing code, but they are core to the role. So for example, for our head of marketing role, we actually have a take-home assessment that is written that allows you to actually get clear signal on the candidate, specifically how they approach problem solving. Our aim during the course of our interviews is to get a signal on how the candidate problem solves, either through hypothetical or behavioral questions, to get insights into whether or not they have the skill sets to do the role and actually to thrive in the role. And as Amanda said, for certain roles, when we approach the boundaries of candidates, we still contain that information and keep it in our ATS so that in the future, if we do have a role that's open and they are fit, we can reach back out because we've already obtained those skill sets. So to answer your question succinctly, yes, we use Google Sheets, and not a very technically sophisticated tool to deploy.
We want to know what you use, not fancy it up. That's great.
Yeah, to deploy the actual take home, and we review it in our ATS and provide feedback specifically through lever forms in our ATS.
That's great. Amanda, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the examples I'll provide you might enjoy for a recruiter role, for example, we will send a resume to the candidate and say, we would like you to conduct an interview for this software engineer, for example, right? And so the title of the resume is engineer, because we think that's funny, right? And they will interview Caitlin, who's on our people team, who is pretending to be the person on the resume, and it's really the resume of someone else on our team. And we'll ask them to conduct the interview and tell us if the candidate's qualified for the role. And so we're looking for how they engaged with the candidate. So it's a mock interview for the recruiter who's applying for the job. And then they'll ask them to do a write-up for it. And so that's one of the assessments we'll do for a recruiter. We also have assessments for salespeople, right? So it's a critical role for all of our companies right now is top sales performers. And we've always done a sales performance interview where, at the end, the candidate has to come in and present to our team in person. We're now doing that over video. And you're being able to measure their ability to interface with technology, which is a pretty critical skill for salespeople right now. So there's a lot of things that you're learning through it being remote that you might not have picked up on when they're in person, because in person, you're setting everything up for them. But when they're remote, they have to be a little scrappier. They have to be able to handle all the different interfaces. And that comes across loud and clear for the sales roles when they're not familiar with the technology.
Yeah. So we gotta wrap up. This has been such a great conversation. My last word I'd love for you guys to give me. This was intentionally about the interviewing process. I think likely we should do one on onboarding as well. But I wonder if you have any, not strategy, but tactics, small stuff that you think others could steal from you guys that you're doing well about transitioning someone from the hiring to the hired to the onboarding in a virtual environment. Anything you like that you guys have done right now that you think others should be stealing from? tactics? You don't have to think big, high in the trees. What do you like that you do?
Staying connected. So staying connected via email, connecting with the candidate, either the hiring manager, the recruiter, or various members of the team, reaching out strategically and authentically to actually connect with the candidate until they get hired. And as it pertains to onboarding, actually scheduling in those, water cooler bump ins so that outside of the core things that you're going to learn, you have 15-minute interviews or 15-minute times to actually connect with folks on your team, 20-minute, 30-minute times that are scheduled for you dispersed throughout your week so that you can get to know not only your team, but the individuals that you may not have met because they're not related to the specific function that you're doing.
Like that. Amanda?
I'm just testing that you can hear me. Is that all right?
Oh, we lost you a
Yes.
little bit. It's a little.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I got disconnected. Apologies. I think one of the
Maybe just speak really loudly.
One of the things our IT team is doing is deploying laptops to our new hires. And so they have that laptop prior to their day one. And we schedule a training with our IT person and them on, that 9 o'clock time slot. And they step them through opening up and, provisioning their laptop prior to all the different onboarding that we have scheduled for them for the rest of the week, which is going really well. And, prior to that, it was different, right? So I think it's an external source that is provisioning it for us, and it's been a nice add for sure. But also pairing them with a mentor who's connecting with them prior to day one, and then meeting them for coffee virtually, checking in with them at the end of week one, end of month one, end of month two. I think that too has been very helpful.
That's great. Yeah, those are great tactics. We have to be thinking about how much the world has changed and how different remote is than what a traditional hiring process is. So we have to adapt. That's perfect. Okay, we got to go. That's this episode of the TWIJ Show. It is an interview series about building better companies. Thanks again to my dear friends, my guests, Mo and Amanda. If you found this valuable, please like and subscribe, as each week we're going to bring you new episodes. You can click for past episodes. I am Chris Wink. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.